Mayor Giuliani, it's been about 2 weeks since you were last on this program. You and I were talking about the explosive development of the New York Post, really uncovering some of the elements that were inside of that reporting. Yet here we are about 2 weeks later, and many mainstream media networks still won't touch this story, claiming that it's unverified information. I want to get your response to that.
Well, I can't believe that they've been able to maintain this censorship for 2 weeks. Every day it's verified to the point where I've never seen anything verified more than this. I mean, they print stories from anonymous sources, one anonymous source on the president. In fact, they actually printed a story with no anonymous source. That was the illegal disclosure of the tax returns that may very well not be Donald Trump's tax returns. They were never verified. There wasn't even a source. And they printed it. So, I mean, what phonies? They're complete phonies. How many one-source stories have you seen in the Times, the Post? CNN doesn't even have a source. They just make it up. MSNBC makes it up half the time. Here you have a story from the very beginning that has a hard drive that you can go verify yourself if you want to, and it verifies itself, believe me. Now you've got about 8 witnesses that have verified it, including experts. I've never seen anything more verified than this hard drive, and I've never seen a press lying more than this present American press corps. It's disgraceful. 3/4 of them should find another profession.
Well, I was going to add to that because in addition to, for example, the information that you've put forward with the hard drive, we've also heard Tony Bobulinski come forward, other associates of Hunter Biden as well, coming forward and verifying some of the claims that are in those emails that we've since discovered, as well as other corroborating pieces of evidence as well. And I know that here at One American News, we have been covering it, and we have been we have access. For example,
thank you. I don't mean to suggest that OAN is.
No,
you're
of course
you're a very honest network, but you are in the very small minority.
And well, that's what I was about to say, is we have been covering this because we do, for example, do some research. We look into, for example, some of these other people who are involved, get firsthand accounts, things of that nature. Has any other mainstream media network or the New York Times or the Washington Post approached you and asked you for the hard drive or for corroborating information?
No, nor is CNN or MSNBC or the Philadelphia Inquirer I mean, it's only the most important story of the year, and it concerns whether or not a candidate for president is a major crook. It isn't about Hunter Biden. It's about whether Joe Biden got some of that $40 or $50 million that his family received when he was vice president. And the hard drive supplies proof that he did, including a text by his son that he gave half of that money to his father. Now, the American people are entitled to hear that, whether the New York Times likes it or not, or whether it fits their political bias or not. It happens to be information that is fit to print. Otherwise, you're a phony newspaper. I mean, they might as well be, I don't know, Pravda. And it's disgraceful. It's disgraceful. The American people shouldn't accept one day of this. I mean, this is a sellout of what it means to be an American newspaper. And you might as well go be in Venezuela or go work for the communists somewhere, because they are not working in the interests of the American people. They are trying to force on the American people a man who is clearly unfit for any office, not just president. The man clearly is working with half his brain. He walks around aimlessly sometimes. He thought he was running against George the other day. Can't get numbers straight, 3-0, 3-3, 6-2. He's been in the Senate 186 years. I mean, I have to keep going on? I mean, it's pathetic to watch him. Plus, he's been a crook all his life.
And I think you touch on the idea, too, that this is a politics story. It's a national security story as well, but it's since developed into a media story as well, because say what you want about the New York Times or the Washington Post, but they have more resources, more investigative units to get to the bottom of this if they wanted to. But to date, they still won't even ask you for the hard drive. They won't try to verify some of these claims. And I think that says all you need to know. But I do want to pivot away from the media for a second, because James Rosen of Sinclair is reporting that the FBI opened up a criminal investigation back in 2019 into money laundering allegations against Hunter Biden, an investigation that remains ongoing. What do you make of this?
I think it's protect your backside. There's no evidence of an FBI investigation. They haven't interviewed anybody. They haven't. I brought the FBI evidence 2 years ago. Bud Cummings brought the U.S. Attorney's Office evidence longer than that. They didn't interview anybody. And I sat down with the FBI in early January and gave them a detailed list of witnesses that are ready to testify that Joe Biden accepted multiple bribes, even willing to testify that he has offshore bank accounts in which they are being obstructed in finding by the U.S. Treasury Department. This is according to people that are investigating it on the other side of the Atlantic. And they've never bothered to follow up. I mean, you can't decide something's not true if you don't interview anybody. I mean, you can't say, oh, it's what Hunter Biden said when he said he gave half the money for 30 years to his father is not true when you don't do a single inch of investigating. That's what the man wrote.
Right.
We got to start off with the fact that he wrote it when nobody knew that anybody else would see it or hear it. So you're commanded to investigate if you have just a little bit of honor.
I think there's an additional question there. I mean, we've lived through the past 4 years, and we've seen really how the FBI operates. They've started investigations with far less information, including investigations into the president himself, but he's not the only one. So if we can assume, for example, that if the FBI did have an ongoing investigation, which that's once again being what's reported today, should we assume that Attorney General Bill Barr has that information as well, and he's not making the decision to follow through on an investigation or even speak about this laptop?
I find it very, very unlikely that they have a money laundering investigation, since in January of this year, I brought them documents that just the documents alone prove that Hunter Biden and his firm was involved in a $14 million money laundering operation. I've actually put the documents on my podcast. You can see them yourself. The documents prove that $14.3 million was laundered from Ukraine to Latvia to Cyprus through phony companies, pretending to be a loan and then ultimately ending up with Hunter Biden. And the way we found the last part of it is the records were disclosed in the trial of his crooked partner, Devin Archer, in the Southern District of New York. Southern District of New York had no interest in following up on it, nor did the FBI. It's a money laundering case that, as a former prosecutor, I could put together in 2 weeks. I just need the documents. I have them. It's clearly he participated in the laundering of $14.3 million. It's right on paper. It doesn't take a year and a half of investigating to do it. It takes about 2 weeks for an honest investigator.
We don't necessarily just have to take your word for it. I mean, there is physical proof of what we're looking at right now. I know that our very own Jack Posobiec has been digging into Hunter Biden's other associates, and he has access to their Gmail account. It's not a PDF. It's not something that we can't verify, anything like that. And then we just saw Tony Bobulinski come forward as well, essentially corroborating the claims that are proven in these emails as well. So there was a plethora of information. If any newspaper, if anyone outlet wanted to investigate this further, they absolutely could. So I want to ask you what happens next in this whole saga. I mean, here we are just a couple days away from the November election. It doesn't look like the FBI is going to make any announcement, get involved at all. What comes next in this saga?
Well, I think it really depends on the American people. If we've reached enough of them, if we've gotten through this absolutely unconscionable censorship on the part of big tech and big media and big newspapers, in which they are deliberately depriving the American people of this information. If we've gotten beyond that and Donald Trump gets elected, you can be sure it'll be followed through. It'll be followed through fairly and expeditiously. If not, we will continue with the kind of government we've had since Obama, which is that every case against a Democrat is covered up, particularly if you're a Clinton, a Biden, or an Obama. And every case against a Republican sometimes is a frame-up. And when it isn't, it's exaggerated way out of proportion. That's the kind of country we live in right now due to the Democrats. And if you like that kind of country, then vote for Joe Biden, because you're going to get a crook who's suffering from dementia, if that's what you want as president. If you want a president who's turned our economy around, even again now, we just get a report that our economy is almost all the way back. And on the other side, we got a guy who's talking about the winter coming like it's, Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
But if you want a real president who doesn't hide in the basement and look like he's, ready for the nursing home, well, then vote for Donald Trump. He's done a hell of a job. And he's done a hell of a job. And you probably don't know it because the censorship you're seeing in the media is the cruel, vicious, and lying way in which they covered him.
Yeah, and I think the American people see that as well. I mean, whether we're talking about tech censorship on social media platforms, whether we're talking about the media, news outlets, newspapers, networks ignoring this story, the American people do see that. And I've talked to people on this program, too, not just conservatives, who are saying, if Joe Biden gets into office, I am scared that, for example, we won't find out the origins of the Russia investigation. I'm scared that the Durham report might be suppressed. I'm scared that we won't know about the Michael Flynn investigation either. And I think that this is another...
They'll do the same thing they did to General Flynn.
Yeah.
They'll make up crimes and put Republicans in jail.
And I think that's what a lot of people fear.
They've done that before. Why wouldn't they do that again? The villain here is not Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden was used and misused. And the only reason he's such a terribly afflicted drug addict is his father had him deal with some of the worst criminals in the world. What good father does that? None. Joe Biden, really, if you pass him, you should spit him in the eye. But you can't do that because the Secret Service will arrest you.
Right. But
you sure shouldn't have any respect for a man who uses his son this way.
Well, there is a way for the American people to represent their feelings somehow. On November 3rd, they can go to the ballot box.
One way. You just vote against him. Let him go off to the nursing home. He belongs there anyway.
And we're only a couple days away of finding out if the American people have enough access to this story in order to make their decision based off of it as well. So I think that
possibly won't even know he lost. He'll think he lost to George III or George Washington or George Bush or...
Yeah. Well, those candidates aren't on the ballot, so hopefully the American people don't make that same kind of mistakes. So
he might not know that.
No, you're exactly right. But Mayor Giuliani, I really appreciate you coming on the program tonight, updating us on where we are in this Hunter Biden scandal.
All right.
Have a nice night, Mayor Giuliani. Thank you.
All right.